got a minute.
John, the million is given an ETA of 3 to 8?
Yeah, I just checked with Terry. He does not have a portable generator for dispatch. Maybe something we need to look at for the future.
I think Wendy, everybody did. Yes. Very good. Start doing some scouting.
Welcome, everyone, to the Finance Committee meeting of the Suffolk School Board. Our agenda is before us, so we're going to begin with the presentation by our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Forsman.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. I appreciate your attendance here today. We're excited to be here today to talk about the results of the audit. The results of the audit are wonderful, as you've heard from Dr. Gordon. There were no comments on our audit with the city auditor for the operating fund, grants fund, and food nutritional services fund. And in your packet today, you will see that there were also no comments for any of our schools. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event where you have absolutely no comments on schools. Mr. Carr has been with us almost 30 years, and he's never seen this. So we're very, very excited. We're planning a celebration, of course, for our bookkeepers to celebrate this and encourage them as they can see that they've done a lot of hard work here. This is a lot of hard work on a lot of folks' parts. So we're very, very excited about that. So another thing we're going to do today is review the financial statements. And we've been talking about the financial statements for quite a while and where to find them. So I'm going to take you directly to the City of Suffolk's website, to their document center, and you can see here is their 2021 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. And in the table of contents, all throughout the table of contents, you can see the school board. Let me pull down here, get down this a little bit. Let me get back up. You can see here the word school board. All throughout the table of contents, they show you school board, school board, school board, everywhere that we appear throughout this book.
Can you magnify that just one more? Because I know this is being broke. Hit the plus side.
Yeah, that's where I'm trying to get to. There you go.
There you go.
Oh, okay.
So you can see that we're throughout the book. You can see everywhere where it says school board in the notes, in the other supplemental information, in the required information. Throughout the book, we appear in their comprehensive report. And then we have our own section down here past the net fiduciary position called Discretely Presented Component Unit, City of Suffolk School Board. This entire section is about nothing but the school board. So if we go to those pages, pass their stuff a little bit. You can see here in other supplementary information, discretely presented component unit, City of Suffolk School Board. They explain the funds, the operating fund, food service fund, the grant fund, our OPEB trust fund, and the combined school activity funds are all of them appear in this book, in this section. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all the statements because there's quite a few of them, but I want to highlight just a few things for you in here. And some of this is hard to see. I'm sorry. I'm going to try to keep it as high level as possible. You can see here, each fund is listed in the column. Here are our assets and our liabilities and our fund balances. And you can see that for the operating fund, we had inventory of $424,678, premiums held for workmen's compensation claims. These are claims on our old workmen's compensation plan that we're required to pay if an employee is given lifetime benefits, so we have to keep a reserve to pay those bills, should they come in, of $225,000. Premiums held for health insurance claims. If we should change insurance companies at any time, you have runoff claims that you have to pay from that old insurance company. So again, we have to keep a reserve for that. The $225,000 and $380,000 remain the same every single year, We don't add to them, we leave them the same, unless we feel that we need to increase them for some reason, and then we would come to the board and say, we need to increase this reserve. In addition, we had encumbrances of $6.1 million last year. As you know, supply chains have been terrible, so we actually rolled over, if you will, more obligation that we normally roll over. Usually we're around $5 million. So our fund balance and liabilities together is $28.7 million. And the liabilities include your accounts payable, your accrued payroll, and related liabilities. Accrued payroll is your summer pay. As you know, we hold back a portion of teachers' pay, and we pay those out in the summertime over 4 checks. Well, this is where it is recorded here. You can see we had $17 million. That also includes, we're required to record any leave that someone has on the books at June 30th. What is the value of that leave? That's considered a short-term obligation, right? Because they have the ability to take that leave. So we're required to put that on our books. So that also appears here. And then due to the primary government, this $540,000 is probably very familiar to you. That's the money we asked the school division asked the city to reappropriate to us, right? It was left over at year end, but we had to say we owed it to the city at that time. But in September, we went to the city and we said to the city, we need that money back to cover those sinkholes. They reappropriated it back to us for those sinkholes. Actually, they put it in the capital improvement fund and then they reimbursed us, but basically reappropriated it back to us in order to cover just a fraction of the cost of those sinkholes. But anytime you see due to primary government at year end on financial statements like this, what that means is that was money left over that we are required to ask the city if we can have reappropriated to us. So that's what that line is. So you can see that. Now for grant funds, a little bit different because you owe money, you have money that's due from other governments here, or the $4.5 million, that's federal funds that are due from Title I and 6B, because those are all reimbursable. You spend it first, you ask for reimbursements. So we take a picture at June 30th and say, this is how much is due from those other governments. You also have accrued payroll and liabilities in there, as well as accounts payable, and then due to other funds, right here, this $2.6 million usually means that the operating fund has paid it and we have to pay back the operating fund because we have one bank account, not several, right? We have one bank account, so this is due to the operating fund. And then down here, special revenue for the school grant funds. This is the reserve, or if you will, the amount of money that we received in advance for those grants that weren't reimbursable that we had not yet spent. Okay? The food service fund here, what I want you to note here is the fund balance here of $2.6 million. You can see that it went down. I'll show you on a different sheet that it went down because we received less revenue than expense last year. Kids weren't in school 10 months, so you didn't have as many meals sales. And so we used some of that healthy fund balance that we had in order to cover those expenses to the tune of about $2 million. And then school activity funds, as you see, there are very few lines here because what you have with school activity funds, it's a fiduciary account. We take money in from students for fundraisers, for clubs, for athletics, and this is the cumulative balance of all the schools in one line, what they had in cash. And then because it's special revenue, it's assigned because we can't spend that money. That money is for clubs and athletics and things for the schools. So you can see down in the fund balance section that it's an assigned special revenue. And then here is the total of everything. The next statement is the revenues and expenses. And again, this is, very high level. You're just looking at the totals here of what revenue you received from city contributions, from the Commonwealth of Virginia, from the federal government, for the operating fund, grants fund, food services fund. As you can see, the school activity funds, it's miscellaneous because that comes from local funds mostly, but it's from all over local types of funds, so it's a miscellaneous. And then for expenditures, it's all for education. It's considered all for education. They're not required on these statements. These statements are prepared according to the generally accepted accounting principles. They're not required to break it down into the same categories as the state requires us to break it down. So you'll see it's all for education. This transfers in and out, as you can see here, from the school operating fund to the grants fund are the matches for the grants. When we're required to put a cash match to a grant, we move that money from the operating fund over to the grant fund. And in the budget book, every year, the school board approves, there's a line that says, transfer to grants fund, that tells you how much we usually have in that account. So that's what we do there, and they show it here, and you can see they have to show it because it went from one fund to the other. Now you can see here the net change in the food service fund. You see here this negative? This is how much we have spent of our fund. So we had 4.7 million at the beginning of last year, and we spent 1.9 million, and that left 2.7 million. Fortunately, we were in a position where we did not have to help the food services fund out. They had a healthy balance that we didn't spend because we're conservative, to make sure that if we have a rainy day like this, that we have the ability to take care of our funds. Student activities, again, it's very high level because of what it is. It's all for education. You can see here that there's an excess of expenditures over revenue, and that does happen occasionally depending on timing of bills. As you know, the schools reimburse the central office for things like a dual enrollment and parking permits and locker fees, and then we pay the bills to repair the lockers, to repair the parking lots, and to take care of the cost to the community college for the dual enrollment. So you can see that those things, and again, a lot of this is timing. Here are some more. This is the budgetary basis. As you can see, it tells you what was on Exhibit 44, what were budget-based items, and the total, and then it takes that and it balances it back to the Exhibit 42. So there's nothing really big there to talk about. This changes in revenue, scheduled revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance just shows you those changes that I talked about in fund balance and where they came from. And then this is our OPEB trust fund, Other Post-Employment Benefits Trust Fund. We offer our employees who have been with us more than 20 years and have been on our health insurance more than 24 months the opportunity at retirement to remain on our health care until they turn age 65.
Yes, please.
Okay, Dr. Buck? Yeah. Okay. And with that comes a myriad of things that we're required to do. We're required to set aside money for the liability for that, because that comes with a cost of their health care for those years, and we're required to keep it in a trust fund. We're required to have an actuary report on it every other year. We're required to report out specifically under GASB 74 and 75 about that. There's very specific things that go along with this money. This money is sitting in an account. We can do nothing with it. We are not allowed to touch it. Now, unlike a lot of other governments and districts in the United States, we're fully funded. Many are not, but we are fully funded. And if you go back to the notes of the financial statements, you'll see why we're fully funded and where we're fully funded and what our liability is. But at this point, we're 169% funded, and that sounds great until you get into the weeds of that. And what I can tell you about that is that there are assumptions that the actuary makes about earnings on this money, about your lifespan of people who are on your health care now, who may be on the health care at retirement. There are lots of assumptions. This fluctuates as much as 50 to 60% a year as we move people through this plan. We have not chosen to send our health care bills on a monthly basis for our retirees to the trust to pay because of this difference. This affects the city's bond rating if we're under 100%. This affects lots of pieces. You have to do a lot of other things if you're not 100% funded. So I've been super conservative with this and keeping it where it is. Now we're changing actuaries. The actuary the city had, their contract is done. They've chosen a different one. I've already had a preliminary meeting with them, and they are changing some of these assumptions. So next year, we may be 124% funded or 100% funded exactly, because the old actuaries used a 6.75% to 7% rate of earnings, and they're saying that's too high. Every actuary has their own way of doing it, and so you run into these assumption problems. So I have been very conservative to leave this alone, not send bills. We pay them out of our current funds for the retirees every month, so that we don't take the chance of going under 100% and affecting the bond rating of the city. I'm trying to be super careful there with this. So we have $22 million at June 30th in the fund, and it sits there. This shows you that we had a $5 million gain on investments last year and administrative fees of $16,594, and shows you at the beginning of the year we had $16.9 million, at the end of the year we had $22 million. The statistical section shows you and talks about all of what I've just said at great length. I mean, detail after detail after detail of exactly how they've done things. So that all exists inside the city's comprehensive annual report. If you want to read about it, you're welcome to do so. I don't want to go into all that detail. That's a lot of detail for you all. So it talks about everything that we just talked about, the demographics, the economics information, all the tables, and it gives 10 years of information. If you want to know how the state's retirement is doing for teachers, that's up in the required statistical information, not down here. But you can see this is very comprehensive. These financial statements are very comprehensive and provide a wealth of information if you know what you're looking at to read them. All right, so let me go back to the agenda. So that's the review of the financial statements. I'll stop here and ask if there are any questions.
And do whatever. I'm sorry. I do have one. When we talk about the teacher retirement, I know that during COVID, I think we've had a greater number of people retire than normal.
Yes.
How does it impact, or have we thought about how it impacts, because I've thought about how it impacts the state retirement and how it's going to impact that fund in the long run. Does it impact us individually at all, or do you think I know it impacts the state as a whole, but do you think it's going to impact us in the long run with
I do.
regard to our contributions?
I do. That's why I believe that the governor left the contribution rate as high as he left it. We had the opportunity this year to take it down. The actuary actually came back and said it could be less, but they did not do that. They left it at the higher rate, about 18%, because of that. And I think that we'll see it continue to go up until all of the Plan 1 people are through and finished retiring, and some of them drop off. That sounds terrible, but that's really what happens. And then you'll start seeing the hybrid come through, which are much less expensive, and then things will eventually begin to drop. But I think you're probably 20 years out before things begin to drop. But absolutely, it will affect school divisions individually at some point. Any other questions? All right, let's talk about supply chain interruptions and cost increases and how they're affecting us. We have seen supply chain interruptions that are 24 months out, 18 months out, 6 months out. We obligated money last year end for some vehicles. We have now been told we might see them next spring. We have obligated furniture last year that we're just now beginning to get in. Teacher desks, rolling desks, things that they needed in the classroom. You just can't get them. The equipment, HVAC equipment that we're putting this summer, we ordered last October because we were told if we didn't, we wouldn't have it for the summer. The chillers that we need for Kingsport Middle School that we're asking to do with the CARES Act, we're ordering them this week in order to have them for December. and the company that's installing them is going to do all the work in their shop to put them in place so we can put them in over Christmas break, because we don't want to wait till summer. So it's those kinds of things that are costing us dearly. When we're seeing RFPs come back, we're seeing things that are 20 and 30 and 40% higher than planned, than that we knew were going to happen. Software, everything is just skyrocketing. So I wanted to alert the Finance Committee to those issues that we're facing. Cell phones, something as little as cell phones. We've been waiting 5 months for cell phones replacements. Just something that little, but something that affects walkie-talkies, those kinds of, just everything that we try to touch, we're hitting these supply chain shortages and unable to get. So it's increasing, as you know, with economics, supply and demand. It's just causing havoc with our costs. So we're trying to be extremely careful and strategic about what we purchase and when. So when we come to you in May with the resolution about what we're going to spend, it may look very different this year because it will have to be tailored to what we think we can actually get.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So with that in mind, I want to talk to you a little bit about number 5, which is seeking permission to establish 2 new escrow reserve accounts. You know, we do this.
Before you go to that, let me ask you about 4, because you know one of my major concerns has been getting in equipment that we need to meet our COVID safety needs. And I know that over the past couple of years, people have been given the impression, or it was almost like, and it's not because we gave them the impression, but it's like, well, the government gave you the money to buy this. And so we think everything should go at some kind of, in a nanosecond, we should have all this stuff and all the filters in place and all the buildings should be built and all the stuff should be fine and everything should be fine so that we can just drop everything and go in school and all stuff is in place. But I know as we've ordered things, they have not been in place because people have called and said, we don't have this, okay? And you all have told me, this hasn't come in. How are we with, as you mentioned, the CARES Act money, as we're trying to buy things with the CARES Act money to meet those needs? Are we still behind with some of the filters, some of the other things that we wanted to get to improve air quality and all that? Have we gotten all that stuff in place?
We were out in front of all of that, and we were able to get ours in a very timely manner when it came to those. Masks, shields, plexiglass, the cleaners, all of those kinds of things to mitigate COVID, we were out in front of. We ordered in advance and didn't wait for the money to get approved through everything. We ordered out of the operating fund and then moved it when the funds came in because we knew we were getting the money. So we were in front of a lot of that. Mr. Hines, Anthony Hines, our purchasing person, is a phenomenal purchaser. He goes out and finds it. He will find it for you. And so he was able to keep us in front of most of that. What we're finding now is normal things that we need.
Okay.
Vans, trucks, cell phones, walkie-talkies, teacher desks, normal things that we actually can purchase because the federal government flooded so much money to school divisions. Everybody's purchasing.
Oh, okay.
And that's
Okay.
killing supply chains,
Okay.
right? We're competing with every other school district in the country for pretty much the same things because we all have the same needs.
Right.
And so 1, it's driving prices up, and 2, it's causing these supply chain interruptions.
So do we have filters, the kind of filters that we need for all of our air filtering units and air conditioners and
Yes,
all that
ma'am.
stuff? All that stuff is good.
All that's done.
So now we need, like, how about buses and I know we were talking at one point about the new buses and things that we needed. How are we on track with,
Well, we need 16 buses, not right this minute. We've got
but we know
16
we're
that
going
will
to need
be,
those?
should be sunsetting by June of next year.
Okay.
And we're already trying to figure out exactly how we're going to get those.
Yeah, because I was reading a news story about that in the, not here, but that people were having difficulty getting the new.
You're exactly right, and we've looked into a couple of things. One of the things that the board asked us to do was to also take a look at the air conditioning on some of the buses that we currently had, and then Ms. Forsman, for each bus that we have ordered and will order in the future, will also have air conditioning. And to piggyback on her point, once we got the first information about some of the details of COVID, the first thing that we did was make sure that we had bipolar ionization in all 21 of our buildings. We already had it here at Cherry and Southwestern, for example, because they were new. But that was the first thing we really did with our CARES Act 1 money. And as you know, from our last probably major order, I believe it was 40,000 KN95 masks that Ms. Forsman has distributed for staff that are in our buildings right now, that we basically distributed based on staff enrollment. We did that a couple of weeks ago. So we are actually in a good place for any of our mitigation strategies. It's just our normal supplies. The desks are something, we knew when we ordered furniture last year, we were told it was 44 weeks out. And so that's something that we've been kind of dealing with. So now that the supply timeline itself has gotten a little bit better because of the basic economics of supply and demand, the cost has went up tremendously in order to make sure that it got there.
So now to
Questions on that?
get half of what we want, we have to pay twice as much.
I have a question. Okay, I know this is not buses and stuff. What are we doing about gas, the price of gas? You know, everything is going up tremendously. So you budget one amount for this. How are you handling that?
Well, we've left our budget over the last 2 years alone. We did not cut the gas budget when we weren't in school. We simply didn't do that. And so we are in very good shape with that. So I'm pleased to say that we will have enough to get through the year, and what we budgeted for next year should be fine.
Okay.
Unless we go over $5, $6 a gallon, we may have to come back to you. But at this point, we are doing very well with that budget.
Thank you.
Okay?
I have another question.
Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned a while back in your discussion, sinkholes.
Yes.
How are we covering that?
Well, we are using current money to cover that. Part of the reason we did not announce the bonus until now was to try to make sure that we had the dollars to cover those sinkholes. Now, in past years, we've kind of patched them. What changed this year is that we took the time and money to completely repair the source of the problem.
Okay.
So where the pipe was crushed in a place, we were able to have a scuba diver, believe it or not, paid a scuba diver to go into the pond and run a camera to see where the crush was, what was happening, and we took that information, the vendor took that information and replaced the entire length of pipe with concrete
Okay.
pipe. So we've taken the time this year to really make sure that the repairs that we were making were not Band-Aids, that they were proactive, long-term solutions to the issues that we were having. Now, will we have some more sinkholes? I'm sure.
Right.
But each one, we're treating that sinkhole as if we were going to repair it forever.
Okay.
We're not doing Band-Aid stuff. We're not filling it with sand or,
Right.
we're trying to find out exactly what the
we
problem
do.
is. Now, 540,000, of course, we saved aside last year, and we're able to get reimbursed for that, for some of the money that we've spent this year. So that really did help us. That was probably easily half the money that we've spent. So we try to, whenever we know these things before year end, save aside, ask the city to give it back to us so we can cover these emergencies. If you'll remember Oakland,
Right.
roof, same
Right.
thing. We knew that right at year end. We knew there was no way we could do it before year end or obligate it. So we saved that money aside and asked the city to give it back to us to repair that roof. So we try to be as conservative as we can with the money and know that, we know the conditions of our buildings. We know that we've got old roofs. We know that we have old things. But we try very hard to make sure that we are conservative in our expenses so that when these unexpected things come up, that we can handle them.
With some of the new monies, since you mentioned that, and we might, with some of the new monies that we hope and some that have already been approved with the government, have we had or do we see any opportunities for us to work to get some of that as we look at building or repairing some of our buildings or building some new buildings? Have we seen some opportunities for that?
So we have heard about those opportunities, because I know you've actually done some lobbying for that, Dr. Buck, but no formal documentation has come down
Has
yet.
come down yet. Okay.
And so we're hoping, from what we've kind of gathered, that we should hear something in May
Okay.
to give us some time to be able to plan for a summer start. But there's going to be, and I'm sure you already know this, but there's going to be an application process that we don't know what it's going to ask for. And so as soon as we get that, that is something that we've already had a conversation with Mr. Napier's team to hop on as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, so number 5 is kind of our way of looking at how we can mitigate some of the, I call it volleyball, between us and the city with some of this money for specific reasons. For instance, with buses, with these vans. We've ordered them, they're obligated, they may not come in timely manner, and I may end up having to liquidate them, ask the city for the money back, get the money back, go through all that. So what I'd like to do is bring to the board in April the question of establishing 2 new escrow inventory accounts, basically escrow reserve accounts. One for fleet that would be no more than $3 million. And each time we put money in it or took money out of it would come to the school board so they would know exactly what we were doing. And then one for textbooks, because we always struggle with textbooks when we're doing these adoptions where half the adoption's done, the other half doesn't get done in time. We can obligate some this year, some next year. It's just a lot of jockeying around that doesn't have to happen. And then we play all this volleyball with the city, where it goes there, then we have to wait till September, we have to get it back, it gets back to us in October, November. By then, we've already paid the bills, everything's being reimbursed. It just creates a lot of extra work on the staff, a lot of extra work trying to keep up with it and make sure everything's done properly. If we could establish these 2 reserve accounts, and each one of them will have a maximum on it. So the fleet, I envision $3 billion, and the textbooks would be no more than $1.5 million. And we would put money in them with the board's permission, and then we would spend money out of them with the board's permission, and we would report on those totals annually so that you would know exactly what's there. And of course, once the board approves this, we'd have to go to the city and ask for their approval because, again, some of the money I'd like to put there is from last year's appropriation that's obligated that we know we're not going to get until next year. And so by establishing these, we just take out that 4 to 6 month back and forth between us, the school board approving it, the city manager getting it, his taking it to the council, them approving it, then the finance department getting it back to us. Just takes out 6 months' time going back and forth for things that we purchase all the time. Things the city has reserves for as well. They have reserves for fleet as well. So we're not asking to do anything different. I've already talked to the auditors about that. They're in full agreement that this is a good way for us to go. We don't need to establish a separate fund balance for it or a fund for it because it's so little money in the scheme of the entire budget. They don't feel the need. But they do feel that we should have both the school board and the city approve it. So if that's okay with you, I'd like to bring that to the April meeting for the board to consider.
I think it's a good idea. And what it does is mimic what the city is doing already. Correct. So we're not doing something that's different from what the city is doing. We're doing something that's consistent with what the city is doing.
They have a risk management reserve. They don't
Okay.
have textbooks. They have risk management reserve.
They have risk
They have
management.
a fleet reserve.
Okay.
We're asking for textbooks and fleet because textbooks is our specific thing.
Okay. No, I don't have a problem with it, do you?
No.
Well, that's really all I have. So unless there's some other questions or something you'd like to ask me about, we'll see you in May at our next meeting when we talk about year end.
No, I don't have a question. I have a comment. I think this is wonderful. This is the first time we have no comments, no concerns, no questions, no nothing. I think that's wonderful. Okay?
We're very
I
excited.
really do. I think that's wonderful. And thank you and your team for such a wonderful job with this. That's all I can say.
I think this escrow thing will save your staff a lot. And I have said before that, I felt like you're understaffed, right? See those people like that. And I think this can help that process, because switching back and forth all the time, it's unnecessary when you could set up something like this. I agree with that.
I think that's a great idea. Okay. Well, if all minds are clear, we are ready to go. Thank you. Thank you, and thank you all for the work that you do. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you. We are done.